What's up? What's up? This is Zach Boschman checking in. You are locked into the Citizen Truth podcast. We're honored today to have Doug Valentine on the podcast. Today we're talking about Doug's book, The CIA as Organized Crime. So, Doug, let's go right into the first question. You say the CIA is a, quote, criminal conspiracy on behalf of wealthy capitalists, end quote. Could you elaborate on that and speak to the connection that the CIA might have with Wall Street?
Sure. That's the essence of the thing. And could speak about it for hours, but we'll try to sum it up. It's not just, assuming your listeners know what capitalism is, okay? It's not just capitalism, it's American capitalism, which, like any nation in the world, has a brand of capitalism which reflects its culture. So American capitalism is militant, which goes back to the founding of the country. It's racist, it incorporates systematic racism. It's decidedly Christian and, promotes Christianity worldwide. The CIA often followed missionaries into foreign countries. It's a brand of capitalism that reflects America and Americans' culture and America's values. And the personification of this is a guy named Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was the president of the United States during World War II, also during the Great Depression. And he sort of is the guy who began the era of neoliberalism, because the Wall Street had a collapse in 1929 and began the Great Depression. People on the stock market on Wall Street had speculated, and they didn't have the money to back up their speculations, and the Wall Street collapsed. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt incorporated what were socialist policies throughout the United States, where government money was used to create social programs. And this was a departure from what had been going on traditionally in the United States. And when World War II began, and he had no choice but to, after Pearl Harbor, to actually send, incorporate America in World War II, he created a secret service, which was the parent organization of the CIA. And that was called the Office of Strategic Services. Now, Franklin Roosevelt himself, again, is the personification of the American establishment. His ancestors were Dutch settlers in New York in the 17th century, and they owned vast tracts of land in what is now Manhattan. And he's a direct descendant of these guys. I mean, these are the guys that killed all the Indians in New York State and took everything they owned and created Wall Street. Wall Street was this little faction of Manhattan, which had a wall around it to protect the Dutch from the Indians. And that's how it gets its name. Well, Roosevelt's family was there. I mean, these are the people who built that wall. And so in 1940, 41, 42, when the United States enters World War II, well, he's the president. And it's no mistake that a guy like Franklin Roosevelt has the support of the American establishment in order to, he was actually president for several terms, which was unusual. And because he did represent the interests of the establishment in every way conceivable. And I should say that the Merriam-Webster Collegiate Dictionary defines establishment as a group of powerful people who run a society or government through secret negotiations. The establishment has its own little class of people, and they decide the tax laws and what should be taught in public schools and all these sorts of things. And so Roosevelt's the guy who creates the Office of Strategic Services in World War II. And the guy he taps to staff out the Office of Strategic Services, a guy named William Donovan. who's a Catholic from Buffalo, and he had married into the wealthiest family in Buffalo. And William Donovan had gone to Columbia Law School with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They knew each other. And this guy Donovan was called a lace curtain Irishman, which meant that he sided more with the Anglophiles than with the IRA. And Roosevelt taps his old buddy Donovan, who's a reactionary, who believes that communism has to be wiped out to protect Christianity and the Catholic Church. And the people that Donovan taps in turn to create this Office of Strategic Services, its executive management, all come from the establishment. They're guys like Mellons and just you name the industry and the banking institution, the lawyers for Wall Street. These are the people that Roosevelt trusted Donovan to choose, and he chooses them. And they're the people that run this organization. Now, this organization also hires mafioso, because when they need to invade Italy, they need some connections there. And it's Vito Genovese, and it's people who had been, old-time mafioso guys who did not like communism either. And they didn't want, once the German, they were all very friendly with Mussolini, as was Henry Ford, and many American industrialists supported the fascists in World War II, but they all hate the communists, and including the mafia. So when this organization of strategic services hires people of every nationality, of every religion, in order to do the jobs that need to be done, but at the same time, its executive management, the people who run it and create its policies, are all from this Roosevelt Donovan establishment. And that way they control through their establishment connections, their private agreements, control over the secret services of the United States. And that is what still goes on today. If you look at anybody who was the defense secretary of the United States since World War II, they're all industrialists. They're all guys who ran General Motors or some banking company or these are not, or the establishment is not reaching into the local grocery store owner or plumbers to run these, from your community to run these huge bureaucracies. They're tapping into the people who are Wall Street bankers, they're lawyers, media people, but basically industrialists. And the first guy to actually run the CIA, who was an admiral named Sidney Sewers. And this was a guy who ran American Life Insurance Company. He'd been a banker on Wall Street. And this is what happens all the time. So in understanding how the CIA comes to be a particularly American version of capitalism, you have merely to look at the people who run it and where they come from. And then the people that they hire at the lower ranks, indeed, just like in the American military today, when there's a parade at an NFL football game, they march out a lot of black guys, in uniform, and even some women. But the people who, these people never get a promoted above sergeant, and it's the executive management of the military and the CIA, and any important institution in the United States continues to be overwhelmingly establishment, capitalist, Christian, and militant, and that is what the CIA is all about, is advancing the interests of this particular establishment class. And they do so secretly, and as opposed to America's stated objects, policies. There's the CIA. This will be the last thing I'll say about this particular answer, but the CIA conducts America's unstated policies. The stated policies of America are that we're democratic, that we're egalitarian, and that everybody has an equal chance. The unstated policies of the United States are contradictory to that. And the institutions and the systems that the establishment puts in place do not actually allow for racial equality or the success of average people. They still create a tax system that allows billionaires to have tax-free retirement accounts with $20 billion in them, while you're paying 40% of your money to the government. So there's you can't be fooled by the stated policies. The Declaration of Independence: all men are created equal except blacks, and they're slaves. There's an inherent contradiction in the messaging, and the CIA is the nowadays in the modern era the primary mechanism for making sure that that message is correct and serves the establishment class at the expense of anybody who's not in it.
Doug, so your first book on the CIA is the Phoenix Program. What is the Phoenix Program, and why is it relevant today?
The Phoenix Program was created by the CIA in Saigon in South Vietnam in 1967. And it was a program that the CIA created in order to identify, capture, imprison, interrogate, and kill the communists who were secretly organized in South Vietnam and were running the insurgency in South Vietnam. So it's essentially a police program, but like something the FBI would do here in the United States, or nowadays the Department of Homeland Security, which is actually modeled on the Phoenix Program in South Vietnam. So in order to identify and capture and kill all the communists in South Vietnam, the CIA created what was called, it incorporated 25 military and intelligence and police organizations that were operating in South Vietnam, and brought them all together and focused them on this communist counterinsurgency in what were called intelligence operations coordinating centers. Right? And a Phoenix guy, a guy from the who had been appointed by the Phoenix Directorate in Saigon, and it was in the beginning they were CIA people. Later they became military people. They would coordinate these 25 organizations, representatives from in every district, and province in South Vietnam. There were 44 provinces, which are equivalent to a state in the United States. And the districts were, I think there was 250 of them in South Vietnam. They were equivalent to a county. And so they covered the whole country with these intelligence operations and coordination centers, where they brought all the military intelligence and police services together and focused them on the communist insurgency. Now it's relevant today because after 9/11, and with the new threat of possible Muslim terrorists existing throughout the United States, the government George Bush created first of all, the Office of Homeland Security, which was in October of 2001, a month after 9/11. And the guy that was tapped to write up the enabling documents for this Office of Homeland Security was the guy I had interviewed for the Phoenix Program book, a former CIA guy named Bruce Lawler, who had gone through a series of ups and downs, and in the late 1990s had come to head within the United States, the military branch that ran civic affairs in the United States. The military relations with civic institutions in the United States, police forces, corporations, anywhere that football teams, any kind of civic organization that the military felt that it needed to work with. Bruce Lawler was in charge of them. And under Bruce Lawler, who'd worked for the CIA in South Vietnam as part of the Phoenix program, he created this Office of Homeland Security based on the Phoenix program. And the first thing he did was create NORTHCOM, or suggest that NORTHCOM be created. NORTHCOM is the first military command in the continental United States. It's called NORTHCOM. The military never had a command in the United States until NORTHCOM. And this gets created a month after 9/11, and it becomes the backbone of the Department of Homeland Security. And now it is this Office of Homeland Security within a couple of months becomes a full-fledged Department of Homeland Security, which we now know today. And it combines, just like the Phoenix program did, all the intelligence, like the FBI or the intelligence branches of every state police service in the country, the intelligence branch of every police force, the CIA, which is not actually indicated on the organizational chart, but which is represented through the Department of Homeland Security Office of Intelligence and Analysis. They are there, and they have to look into everything that the department, have access to all the intelligence that the Department of Homeland Security accumulates on its computer system, so they control for people that they want to turn into double agents or agents and send back overseas. I've worked for them, the CIA. And that's how that whole thing comes together. Again, with Bruce Lawler, just like Roosevelt and Donovan were personification of the CIA. This guy, Bruce Lawler, who really hated the left, really hates the left, became the personification of the Department of Homeland Security. And then eventually the Department of Homeland Security created a fusion center in every state in the United States. And these are just like the intelligence operations and coordinating centers of the Phoenix program that serve the exact same function. And they're bureaucratically organized the same way. And again, the people that run this organization are not cops on the beat. They're not plumbers, electricians, guys who run the grocery store, and they're part of the establishment. They're connected to, in every state, what's the people who own what's called the critical infrastructure, and which is what the Department of Homeland Security is dedicated to protecting. And this, the critical infrastructure is Microsoft, the internet, oil industry, any kind of, the people who actually, the industrialists who actually own the United States of America. The Department of Home, it's businesses, it's major businesses, it's TV and radio stations, anything that's really important to the infrastructure, which Biden is now promising to update. The Department of Homeland Security is dedicated to protecting those civic institutions, and the military coordinates with them through the NORTHCOM and Department of Homeland Security. And so does the CIA and every law enforcement institution in the United States through these fusion centers, and also off the organizational chart, just through personalities and personal connections. So it's important to understand the Phoenix program for that reason.
Thank you, Doug. I think we have time for just one more. I'll just do the next question on the list here. I want to turn our attention to the media. You say journalism in the U.S. is a traditional cover for CIA officers. Many of us have heard of Operation Mockingbird. What was that, and is there currently a program like that today?
Well, sure. That was and when the CIA was going through its early organization, before it actually became in 1954, the CIA as we know it now. There was a branch of what was being formed into the CIA called the Office of Policy Coordination under a guy named Frank Wisner, who was a Southern aristocrat, who early on, who had been in the OSS and stayed on and ran its covert operations around the world. The CIA has special intelligence, which is agent nets, and then it also has covert action, which are the deniable operations that the CIA creates around the world, including within the United States. And this guy Wisner created what he called the mighty Wurlitzer. Again, it has to do with messaging. And in order to provide cover for CIA operations around the world, he knew that he had to form relationships with the major media in the United States. Many of the, like a guy who owned the Brooklyn Eagle, a guy named Preston Goodfellow, was one of the original founders of the OSS. And so the media had always been a part of the secret services of the United States. Roosevelt and Donovan and all these guys knew that in order to conduct their covert operations, they had to have the complicity of the media in order to be able to say, we don't want you telling how we're overthrowing Guatemala, or we don't want you guys reporting on how we're overthrowing Mossadegh in Iran. You guys got to help us out. And they were more than happy to do it. And so Mockingbird is the original operation, original in the sense that it was formalized and giving a name, understanding they had done it all along, even back to the creation when the Declaration of Independence is written and claims that all men are created equal, except for the clause that says not blacks. The messaging has always been important, and Americans understand that preserving the myth of democracy is very important. And if you're going to have an organization like the CIA that conducts unstated, undemocratic policies, imperialistic, neo-colonial policies around the world, you have to control the messaging. And so Operation Mockingbird became the way that was going to be done. And it, basically became a bureaucratic way of conscripting all the major media of the United States into this coordinated effort to control the message that was delivered to American people so that the CIA could continue its operations, undemocratic operations around the world in secret. A guy named Guy Debord said, secrecy is the key to dominance, foremost as the secret of dominance. So you can't dominate and have an establishment that rules you if you know that it's there and it's doing it. You have to have, the establishment has to operate in secrecy, and it has to have a cover story of lies to protect it. And the CIA basically created that, along with the military and the State Department, and certainly all the industrialists were more than happy to go along with it, including the industrialists who own the media.
Just one more question related to the media. You talk about the compatible left in your book. What is the compatible left?
That was a term that was coined by a CIA officer named Cord Meyer, who was in charge of, who was part of this Office of Policy Coordination, which later became the Department of Plans, doing the covert operations of the CIA. And after World War II, it was the communists and socialists throughout Europe had been the only people that basically had resisted the fascists. And so the United States finally found itself with military bases in Europe, in Italy, in Germany. There was American military government in Germany for many years, which actually ran the country and reorganized it. And all throughout Europe and Asia, there's now all these military bases. And now they're no longer fighting fascists. They're getting the fascists back up on their feet. And they in order to fight the new menace, which is Soviet and then later Mao Zedong communism in Asia. And in order to do this, they had to convince the communists who they had worked with in the resistance to the fascists to come over to American way of doing things. And so this became the major program of the CIA in post-World War II Europe and also in Asia, which was the idea of creating a compatible left, organizations on the left that would move away from Soviet communism, and they would entice them. The CIA would secretly entice communists to come over, and they thus searched out the compatible lefts. Francis Stoner wrote a book about it, and how the media and the world of arts and letters were central to doing this, to making an intellectual appeal to the leaders of the communist leaders of labor organizations in particular, which is what this guy Cord Meyer focused on. He was the head of the International Operations Group. And so they had labor leaders from the United States, in particular a guy named Joseph Lovestone and his deputy Irving Brown, who went around to all the labor organizations and gave them bags of money and said, come over to the dark side. And a lot, everybody was starving in Europe. After World War II, people were displaced, they were living on pennies, and they needed the money. And so a lot of them sold their souls to take CIA money to get themselves back up on their feet. And instead of being, they severed their ties with the Soviets and created their own brands of what became known as social democratic parties across Europe and Asia, and became very profitable for them. The Christian Democrats and things like that, and the CIA is very largely responsible for providing the seed money for these new intellectual newspapers, magazines, and labor organizations, which took the CIA's money and to varying degrees did its bidding. That's the compatible left. And I should add that, this is what the forces of reaction are doing on a daily basis and have been doing ever since labor organizations were created in the United States. The whole idea is to convince their leadership to come over, to the side of capital. Capitalists have done a very good job over, the last century of convincing labor leaders to compromise the people they represent and their interests, and to divide them and pit them against themselves. They do the same thing with leaders of the civil rights movement. They do the same thing with leaders of the feminist movement. These are the people that the CIA is going after. They're not going after Fox News because Fox News already knows what to say. They're not going after reactionaries and people who support capitalism and the capitalist ruling class. They're going after, trying to court anybody who's, somewhat in opposition to the capitalist ruling class.
Doug, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for writing these important books and your important research. Everyone, make sure you go out and check out Doug's books. Thank you so much. Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Okay, my pleasure.